All right, this one's going to seem kind of crazy to some, but we have debated for a long time things like the dinosaurs, and I'm going to explain briefly why that would be worthy of debate. I mean, it's not like we don't disbelieve they existed, right? We know dinosaurs were real, we know they did exist. So, how is it? Sorry about that, I clicked the wrong button. So, how is it if this exists and we know dinosaurs existed? That's never been the question. The question is this: we know scientifically that biology is required in the soil for anything living to grow. Well, something occurred to me, and it's scientific, but it also touches on religion because, according to scripture, a third of God's angels left his army angry over how much of the universe was built around human beings. I mean, that didn't make any sense. Why would there be so much effort into human beings? I mean, come on. He created the universe, he created all life. How is we more effort than any other race? Well, what if the very concept of having a race existing on a planet requires certain things? For example, let's say you're God and you want to create a race, humans. They're going to need a home. You make the planet. But you can't make it a desert. It can't be barren rock. There has to be biology in the soil, or we can't grow food. There has to be abundant water that matches our population level. Have you ever noticed our water levels are constantly rising throughout human history? We notice that our water levels have been rising as long as we've been recording history, at about the same rate as our population rises. We never run out of water. The planet is manufacturing it. How is it after billions of years of every frickin' billion species that we have here drinking water, we still have more? And not only that, we're not running out. We're getting more. We're not using enough of it. How do you account for that from a rock? So here's what occurred to me. For one, for human beings to exist at all on this planet for as long as we've been here requires a substantial amount of biology in the soil. Our electromagnetic field is strong enough that really tall things don't grow here well. Even people that are 8 or 9 feet tall have real problems. We have animals like giraffes that can handle being big in our field, in our gravitic field. Now, we have thought for a long time that we're small because of gravity. What if that's not it? What if the dinosaurs were created huge? Because that was, when you're trying to put biology into the soil, you don't want a bunch of little tiny creatures. Imagine if it was, God had created mosquitoes and said, okay, let the mosquitoes populate the earth until the earth is ready for humans. Well, that's what would have to happen. Some kind of life would have to have been brought here and died in the soil to make the soil in the first place. You need biology for there to be living soil. There have to be living things in it. Well, when the world is dead to start with and made of lava, it's not spewing out water. It's sure as shit not spewing out life from a pool of molten lava. So imagine that lava hardens. Well, now we have stone on the surface. We don't have sand. Sand is a process. And we look at other planets, we see the same. They've got sand. They're not just some lump of rock and magma. They're complex. And the things that are in them don't make sense when you look at how a star would form. Where's the water coming from? If a whole bunch of gases got together, okay, fair enough. Where's the water coming from? Where's the stone coming from then? Where's the ball of fire coming from at the core? This is complex stuff. Now consider we got a molten core, but the planet is producing water in vast quantities. Those two things are incompatible. Fire should be evaporating it, not forcing it up out of the surface under pressure, yeah, but evaporating it. You look at a hot vent, it's coming out as vapor, steam. Geysers are that, not a hot spring, a geyser, but both operate under the same principle. It's just a matter of how close the lava is to the water. And we know that. Okay, fine, fair enough. We know that there are a lot of these vents under the ocean where water is coming out of these vents. Well, that means that right near the core that's molten is a whole bunch of liquid water. Not necessarily. If there was all that liquid water in the core enough to account for what's on the surface, we would never have had a molten core. We couldn't. And molten cores don't create water on their own, which means there's a whole bunch of things going on here that don't actually make sense in physics. One, we have biology in the soil. Now, if you were God and you really wanted to create biology in the soil, you need a lot of blood in the soil, you need a lot of bone and tissue matter. Well, what's the most ideal species? Dinosaurs. They're huge. Maybe that's why they were so big. Because God needed them to be big. Because we needed them to be big. See, it's one thing if we were only ever going to be 100 million people, but what if God knew we were going to be 10 billion people? Well, we'd need a lot of water, wouldn't we? And we'd need a lot of biology in the soil. Or we'd run out, and our species would be wiped out because it wasn't self-sustaining, given our population. Well, it seems to me that this world, and it is a scientific fact, wasn't just created to hold life. It was created to hold an ever-increasing amount of life. Meaning it had to be engineered. There is no way this planet exists and isn't engineered. It's just not possible. Consider that water levels are still rising today. It's in the news all the time. Consider subduction, where one tectonic plate goes under another, goes back into the molten core. This planet is working on what seems to be a perpetual cycle. Quite likely, this planet could survive for many more billions of years and sustain life for that time, assuming our sun lasts that long. And that is the interesting part, because traditionally we have believed that life evolved. Well, that we already know that's not technically true, because when one species dies, another one doesn't come to replace it. You want proof there's no such thing as evolution? Mosquitoes have been around for over 35 billion years, and we can prove it, and they've never changed. Flies have been around for the same amount of time. They've never changed. Alligators have been around for billions of years. They've never changed. Sharks, billions of years, don't change. Some species get wiped out, but the shark does not change. The shark has not evolved. That species of shark did not evolve. It either lived or it died. There was no evolution. Evolution implies that same species suddenly morphed into something more advanced. Oh, that's never happened in any archaeological record that we can find. Which means evolution is bullshit. Well, if evolution is bullshit, that means this planet is a creation machine. Like Scripture says. Creativity incarnate. Magic in the works. Only it's directed. Well, I always believed in God, but I now know I can prove it. God has to be real. So, consider those details. One, the biology in this soil was enough before we emerged to allow for our emergence and survival and growth up to this point. That ain't accidental. How is it that the earth had just enough time? And you look, we've already got places that are desert. So it was able to support our population. We don't know how long. The best estimates on how long the human race has been here are probably only about 100,000 years. So if we assume that this planet was built, like Scripture says, to hold humans, it does seem to be ideally suited for our needs, doesn't it? Kind of hard to explain that, too, when you look out into the universe. Hard to explain why it has molten core, a sun so hot that it'll cook you from here, and yet we have ice caps on the surface that are thousands of feet thick. How does that make sense? You've got hot underneath it and hot above it. It doesn't make any sense that there should be such things unless it's a manufactured system. Now, there have been scientists who suggested that there must be something forcing ice to freeze in the Arctic and Antarctic, or how could it have frozen in the first place? How can that much water suddenly spontaneously freeze? And they've come up with all kinds of wild theories why that would be the case. But what if that's what's necessary? Our weather is being created by that combination of hot and cold air. You know that stagnant air is bad for us? Stagnant water is bad for us, which means the whole system needs to be perpetually in motion. The network of things that are in place to make that happen are so spectacular in nature and so unexplainable, scientifically speaking, as to how that could happen. I dare you to ask any scientist in the world today how it is that we're continuing to have rising water levels. We have a molten core. Where's all this water coming from? How are we manufacturing this water? And they can't tell you. At the same time, ask them how we manufacture all this ice to have North and South Pole when we have a molten core, a molten sun outside of that. We're literally sitting in between two big balls of molten goo. And the heat in between them is so vast that you wouldn't survive it. And yet we have ice on the surface of that hot rock. Does that make any sense to you? It certainly doesn't make any sense to me. And we have evidence to suggest that both the North and South poles were tropical to start with. This planet was entirely tropical at one time until the ice caps were created. They seem like they may actually be artificial, just like the manufacture of our water. Now that brings up two interesting points. One, this planet was manufactured, for sure, had to be. But how and by who? Could be by God. After all, it's pretty damn miraculous. But it could also have been terraformed. There are serious signs on this planet that it was terraformed. The science suggests that it was terraformed. And if evolution is bullshit, which we know that it is, then how did the very first of those races get to be here? If it takes life in the soil to make soil, that's living. And we know that's true. If it's dead, nothing grows there. We can't grow food. How would we have eaten? We can't just live on water. And that's the greatest proof. We've never found a single life form that's lived on land that can exist only on water, which means they all had to have food. The dinosaurs had to have something to eat. There had to be plant life for them. There had to be other meat-bearing animals for them to eat. Well, that's a lot of biology that had to be pre-existing in the soil for the first generation of animals to emerge. Huge amount. So much that that's like you preparing your garden by adding a whole bunch of fertilizer because you're about to plant a kind of crop that's going to suck the soil dry. Farmers do it all the time. This planet has been manufactured. That is the theory. Prove me wrong.